because I kind of want to just jump right into talking about the book.
Sure, and I'm flexible, whatever.
Cool. And well, one of the things that I wanted to just start right away with is, I wanted to point out that you started this process of transforming your body and your fitness in your early 60s, right?
I did,
Basically,
yeah.
because that's the focus of the blog is convincing people in their 50s and above that they can either maintain or return to or start fresh, with some fitness pursuit.
Yeah, and I love that theme of your blog. I think your blog is wonderful, and I wish more people would tell that story, because absolutely it is possible to begin exercising, have never exercised before,
Yeah,
at
and
age 60 or older.
that's
Yeah.
you. I mean, that's
That's me.
and now the book begins in a really crazy place, which is, the starting line of the World Age Group Triathlon Championships in Cozumel.
Yes, that was a crazy time. Absolutely.
No, and what year was that?
That was 2016 was my first Worlds.
Okay, 2016, and that was like 3 years after you had begun.
Yeah, I qualified. That was 4 years after I started, and I qualified 3 years after I started. So there's a year between when you qualify and when you actually race.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can just, anytime you want to like jump in and like, expand on a thought or something, just feel free to. But that at that point, then you take the reader through the journey of getting there to that starting line. And you said that you began it sort of began when you read about a woman online about a woman who had lost 100 pounds without surgery or drugs, and you thought, I could do this.
Yeah, so I was morbidly obese most of my life, for decades, and I had tried so many times to diet, and just failed time after time after time. And I finally just kind of gave up and just thought, okay, I was just destined to be heavy. And then, as you said, I read about a woman online who had lost over 100 pounds. And at that point, I was 200 pounds overweight. And, but she had lost 100 pounds, and she did it without drugs and without surgery, just, the old fashioned way of eating healthy and exercising. And I just thought, man, if she could do it, I could do it. And so I started that journey. I read about what she did, and she had just, was eating smartly and exercising. So that's what I started doing. And sure enough, the weight started dropping. So, yeah.
And you also talked about your why, though, and there were some stages of conversations with your sons and your husband.
Yeah. So I think the thing that made me not be successful for decades of trying to lose weight was that I didn't have a why that was my why. It was somebody else's why. And specifically, it was society's why of women should be thin. Attractive women were thin. And so that was enough of a why to get me started with dieting. But it wasn't enough of a why to keep me on track when the cookies were sitting in front of me. so, and then finally, I mean, at 200 pounds overweight, there were just so many things that I couldn't do because of my fitness, but also just because of my sheer volume, my size. I couldn't fit in a restaurant booth. My belly was so big, I couldn't reach around my belly to even put my own shoes on or my socks on. And I just started getting really fed up with all the things that I couldn't do because of my size or because of my fitness. And one day I just said, enough, this is going to change. Yeah. And at that point, it became my why. It wasn't that I wanted to be attractive. It was because I wanted to do things that I couldn't do. Yeah. And that was enough of a why to keep me on track when the cookies were in front of me.
That's what I was going to say, because you have to keep lacing up and getting outside and making yourself do things when it's tough.
Yeah, exactly.
But you got hooked on, I mean, I know in the book you talk about you started with walking and then a little bit of jogging and so on, but you got hooked on triathlon.
Yeah, I really did. Well, I got hooked with endurance sports.
Okay.
And that led to triathlon. I think I think endurance sports, at least for me, I didn't really understand what they were like. In endurance sports, people aren't necessarily racing against each other. They're racing to get to the finish line. And everybody can be a winner. Everybody who crosses the finish line is a winner. And everybody cheers for each other. Everybody helps each other. It's just the most kind and generous community that I've ever been around. And even when I came in dead last, I mean, people were cheering for me. It
And
was just,
staying there.
yeah, it was incredible. So I fell in love with the endurance community, and at first just walking in 5Ks to get across the finish line, coming in dead last. And then running a little bit. I would do a run walk and try to get across the finish line a little faster. And then kind of thought, well, now that I can kind of run a little bit, else can I do? And discovered that I enjoyed dog paddling in the pool, and enjoyed riding my bike. And I thought, what the hey, let's put them all together, and started doing triathlons. And I just, yes, I fell in love with triathlon. There's something about the cross training. It's not like not doing the same thing every day.
Yeah, yeah,
And then I really like the challenge of trying to get from one sport to the next sport really quickly.
yeah.
That's an event in itself, and yeah, it's just a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
in the book, you describe some kind of comical um, first attempts at,
Yeah,
at making
in
those
my in
transitions.
my in my first transition, I had not a clue what I was doing in my first triathlon. I had never seen a triathlon, and I just knew that I had to swim a little bit, and then ride my bike a little bit, and then run a little bit or walk a little bit. And my son had told me I was so scared, and my son told me that I didn't have to go fast, and if I got tired, I could just sit down and rest. And it was just a matter of making it to the finish line. And I wasn't sure I could, but I took my cell phone with me so I could call my husband if I couldn't make it. But coming back to your point, that in my first transition from the swim to the bike, I sat down, I put on clothes over my swimsuit, I brushed my hair, I ate a sandwich. I mean, I was in no hurry to get
Yeah.
off the bike. And it was like that, getting to the run too. I just thought, well, just take my time. And I walked slowly, I strolled through transition. So,
Yeah.
but now I race through. And now I try to get in and out of there in less than, I think it's 23 seconds is my goal.
Oh, wow. That's good.
Yeah.
I've been fascinated. I have always wanted to do, or think I've convinced myself that I want to do a triathlon.
Oh, cool.
But it's quite a time investment to do that kind of cross sport training.
Yeah, it isn't. It is and it isn't. There's different events in triathlon, just like there are in track and field. So in track and field, you can do the mile, you can do the longer distance, so
Right.
you can do a 50-meter, sprint or 100-meter sprint. And it's the same in triathlon. The very long triathlon, the Ironman triathlon, which is 140 plus miles. It takes people all day to do it. And then the shortest, well, the one that I do, there's an even shorter one, but the one that I do that's very common is the sprint
Yeah.
triathlon.
Yeah.
And my first one took me 2 hours and 15 minutes of strolling and brushing my hair and eating a sandwich and all that. So it's not real long. And so, the training, it doesn't have to be real intense like it would be if you were doing an Ironman.
Yeah.
For me, I said, okay, if I can exercise solid for 2 hours, I should be able to do the sprint triathlon. And
Okay.
yeah, so
Do you have any like aspiration to try an Olympic length or an Ironman?
yeah, I have done Olympic length, and I've done half Ironman, so the 70 miles.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and that was interesting. I did my first half Ironman, 70.3 mile, last fall, a
Oh,
year ago. Yeah, just a year ago. So I was 65 when I did that for the first time.
that's great.
Yeah, and that was it was a different kind of journey. I was trying to be fast, but more just trying to make it the 70 miles.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I did really well. I surprised myself. I ended up qualifying for the World Championship in Team USA in that distance too.
That's nuts.
So, yeah. And I probably won't do a full Ironman. I've thought about it, and I have no doubt that I could do it. But it's the training for that is very wearing on your body.
Yeah.
And one of my goals is to keep doing triathlon when I'm 90. So I don't want to wear down my body just yet. So
Okay, now one of my goals is going to be to talk to you when you're doing your 90-year-old.
there you go. Yay. That'll be my motivation. Keep doing this because you need to talk to Marilyn.
That'd be great. If you had to focus on one of the three sports for whatever reason, do you have a favorite among them?
Yeah, I love bike.
Uh,
I my first love was swimming, and I do quite well in swimming. I'm usually among the top first ones out of the water. But there's just something about the bike that reminds me of when I was a 10-year-old.
uh-huh.
I just that wind blowing in your face, and powering that machine below you. And I just absolutely love cycling, and have done really well. I had the fastest bike split in the world's at my first world championship, and I've usually been in the top three ever since. But yeah, and I think part of it is because my body is more, does better. The type of muscles that I have and where my muscles are
Mhm, mhm.
tends to go well with the bike. But I think part of it is I just love it.
Uh-huh.
I feel like a bird, I'm just
That's such a
flying
great way
along.
to think about it. Yeah, that's a really great way to think about it. Um, One of the things that I'll probably circle back to this later on when
Okay.
we're talking about it, but because I'd love for you to suggest to others, how to get started in something like this. But you said in the book there, or there's a way in which your connection to triathlon kind of became, it almost felt like a match made in heaven, in some sense. And that led me to want to segue to another important part of your story,
Thank
which
you.
is that at some point during this physical transformation, you started to have a real kind of spiritual awakening also.
Yeah, I was not expecting that at all. And it was before the fitness part. It was when I had lost about, well, I guess it was about at the same time. I had lost about 90 pounds, and everything just started feeling a little bit surreal. I mean, I remember thinking, who loses 90 pounds, and who does that? And then it started even kind of feeling easy to me. I mean, it wasn't hard anymore to stay on task, and the weight was coming off, and in a healthy way. It wasn't just like, wasn't like I was ill or something. It was, it was just becoming easy. And I started just having these thoughts that, maybe God somehow was involved in this, and maybe God was just blessing me. And yeah, so that became a question mark. And then in church one day, I was listening to our pastor who explained that sometimes God reaches out to us through kindness
Mhm.
and through his blessings. And this light bulb just kind of went off for me. And then shortly after that, my son started talking to me about, he started asking, why don't we talk about God as a family? And then right after that, my coach, out of the blue, I did not even know he was Christian, said, God loves you just the way you are. And I felt like I'd been hit over the head with a 2x4. If it had been a movie, the heavens would have opened, and light beams would have come down on me. But yeah, I finally figured out that it was God, and that God was, showering me with gifts, and that he wanted to have a closer relationship with me, and that he was using triathlons to get my attention, and he did.
And is
So,
that still a kind of important part of it for you? Like, are you, you
yeah,
want,
absolutely.
uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely. It took a while to figure out, like, it was kind of to think that, I mean, I now realize that God reaches out to everyone, But at the time I was thinking, oh my gosh, God is reaching out to me. This is like bizarre.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I had to like kind of get my arms wrapped around that and think about, why me, and what does God want from me? It's if he's reaching out to me, he must want something. And I learned that it was, I don't think that God wanted anything. I think he was just giving.
Uh-huh.
And it was up to me to decide what I wanted to do with God's gifts, and decided that I wanted as much as I could to take steps through whatever doors God opened for me,
Mhm.
and then to bring glory to God. And the doors did open. The book that I wrote was a huge door. um, I once said to my coach, God is opening doors for me. And he said, no, God has opened a trap door and he's shoving you through. So, but the book was part of that. And I think, and I wondered, why, what did God want me to say in this book? And I thought, really, I didn't even have to worry about that. I just needed to tell my story, and that God would bring whoever he wanted to read that story, he would
Uh-huh.
bring me to the book. So,
Well,
so that's what I did.
it's funny because I listened to an interview that you did on a writing podcast. Right now, I think it was right
Yeah,
now
yes,
workshop or something like that. And you told the story about kind of lucking into meeting with a, a representative from Augsburg Fortress Press
yes, yes.
at the conference. And that's how when I first saw your book, the first thing I look at is the publisher, just it's because I'm weird and
Uh-huh.
geeky that way. And I'm like, that Augsburg Press, I mean, as I told you, I'm a seminarian and I teach Christian ethics, and this shelf probably has at least 30% Augsburg Fortress Press
Oh
books
my
on it.
God.
So I wasn't actually expecting to see a book about health and fitness
Yes, yeah.
on their catalog. Um, when you were writing the book, then did you already have in mind that this would be a prominent part of the story, or was it in talking with that publisher representative that kind of helped it coalesce that way?
No, I always felt that God had invited me to write this story, and
Okay.
that was actually my whole purpose in writing the book, was to tell the Christian story.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I also knew that my audience, that my platform was coming from people who were interested in my weight loss
Uh-huh.
and my fitness journey.
Yeah.
And I suspected too that there was some good that would come from that part of my journey as well. I mean, and it has. I've had gazillions of people who have written to me and said that they have taken their first step in their fitness journey after reading about me. But it occurred to me that there would be a lot of non-Christians who would be reading the book,
Mhm.
and so I thought, if I tell my spiritual story, not in a preachy way,
Right. Yeah.
but just tell my story. And, I hope that maybe that would invite other people to think about their faith, and, maybe to wonder, is God reaching out to me in ways that I haven't recognized?
Mhm.
Or through my coach's involvement in my spiritual journey, to think about everyday discipleship.
Mhm.
And, is God calling upon me? If I'm a Christian now, is God calling on me in my everyday life to disciple?
Mhm.
Which is what my coach did with me. I was the recipient of his discipling. So yeah, so that was a big part, and is a big part of my journey. And I hope that there are doors that continue to open where I can step through, and do the things that God is calling me to do.
Yeah. That's a perfect sort of segue, because I was going to ask next about, one of the interesting dynamics and relationships that you talk about a lot in the book is this relationship with Coach Brandt,
Right.
who you point out is younger than your sons, in
Uh-huh.
and that felt really weird to you for for a while, letting this like whippersnapper,
Yeah, yeah, that's the word. I like to call him, a whippersnapper, because think about it. I'm 60, and when I first met him, he was 27, and he had to have enough confidence in his coaching to direct this woman who was older than his not a lot older, but older than his mother.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was a young whippersnapper. And then, and then I had to have enough, I don't know, gumption to take directions from this young kid,
Yeah.
but I quickly learned that he knew what he was doing. And, I wrote about a couple of times when it was really like I had to mind him, and it was hard, and sometimes I wouldn't, and then he would scold me and gently, but it would just always just tickled me that this young man was scolding this older grandma, and I'd start laughing, or I'd want to laugh in the middle of the scolding, which I knew was not appropriate, but yeah. So,
You
and
know,
it was scolding for minor things. He would, in the beginning, I had always been taught that if I did more than my teachers or my boss asked me to do, that was a good thing. And
exactly.
so my coach Brant would tell me to, run 1 mile, so I'd run 2 miles, and thinking I had done a good thing, but then no.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Isn't that,
so,
that's a hard pill to swallow when you, and I
yeah.
think what's funny about that story also is just, I think there are a lot of us who can, of a certain age, who can
Uh-huh.
really identify with having to work with supervisors who are, significantly younger than us.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
I had a supervisor about, well, it was a number of years ago. She was 20 years my junior, well, she's still 20 years my junior. But I used to privately refer to her as baby boss, because I'm like, it's
Love
not
it.
an easy power dynamic to manage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what comes across in your book is that you came to respect his expertise very quickly.
Absolutely. And it was, for a while I didn't know, like I didn't have a box to put our relationship in, because he was a million years younger than me. He was not like my friend, but he was kind of like a father, because he had got to tell me what to do, and I worked for his approval.
Hmm.
And I just didn't have a name to put on our relationship. And finally I decided that we were intergenerational friends. And I really think there's a real beauty in that, because the younger generation, they have idealism and enthusiasm and a sense of zaniness, and that I think as we get older, often many of us kind of lose that. But as the older generation, we have wisdom that we can bring to the table. And it's just been a wonderful friendship, that's nothing like I've ever
Yeah.
experienced. So yeah, it's been
And
very, very
as you
nice.
pointed out just a little bit ago, it also sort of wove into the the spiritual awakening that you were experiencing at the same time.
Yes, yes. And not only because Brant, my coach, was so approachable and so non-judgmental. Once I realized that he was Christian, I had a lot of questions about my own Christian faith. And at the time, I was having kind of a lapse in my faith. I didn't stop believing, but I didn't have an active relationship with God. And I had a lot of questions. And he was very approachable. And I was able to, ask him, things that I didn't know about. And later in my journey, and later in the book, I talk about how his family had a life-death situation that they were facing. And I got to witness the strength of his faith,
Mhm.
and just kind of was amazed by, I mean, we had talked about how there were earthly things and heavenly things, but I got to witness for him that life itself was an earthly thing. And to witness a faith like that, the faith that he had in God, and both he and his wife, had come to terms with, if God wanted to take, a life, then that was okay. That's what God, that was God's will. They were at peace with that. And just being able to witness that was just so powerful. And yeah, so I learned from him in many, many ways, other than just triathlon.
And the happy ending part of that story, at least as of the time you wrote the book, is that his wife is fine, right?
Yeah, no one died.
Yeah, no one died.
And his wife is still fine, yes. And kind of a nice thing, he and his wife are now kind of telling that side of the journey. People who have read the book have called on Brant and his wife to talk about their Christian faith on podcasts and in interviews. And
That's neat. That's cool.
yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And in talking with you, and thinking about what I was going to ask you, I was really focusing on the background parts of this, really remarkable story, because I think that for a lot of people who are returning to fitness or to some sort of athletic, pursuit of any kind, it can be really intimidating to think immediately about competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it turns out that competition really feeds you in a sense. You discovered, as your book says, that you have an athlete inside.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah,
and
yeah.
can you tell a little bit more about how?
Yeah, that was a shock to me. So because I never was an athlete. For people my age, in our 60s, we didn't have sports in
Yeah,
school.
yeah,
And so there was no way for us to know that we like sports or we had a knack for it, which just wasn't something that
yeah,
was on our radar. And I really enjoyed endurance sports, and just I always thought I was competing against gravity. Gravity was trying to keep me from getting across the finish line, and my job was to beat gravity and to make it across the finish line. And
I
I
like
just,
that.
yeah, and it was just, I mean, that was fine. But then one day I was in a triathlon. I was in my second season, very much a beginner, and I was swimming next to a woman, and we were both trying to get to a spot, the same spot where the swim course kind of converged upon one spot, and we were all getting closer and closer as we swam. And my arm came down on top of her back, and I wasn't really like sure what to do. And it came down on top of her back because we were all kind of squished together. Um, and in my first triathlons, for anyone who's listening, you don't have to be squished together on the swim. You can, in my first triathlons, I would like get in the water last so that I was not around anybody else. So I wouldn't hit anybody, nobody would hit me. But in this one, I had a little bit more guts. And so I was swimming more towards the front. At any rate, so my arm comes down this woman, and I'm thinking, what do I do now? On the street, I would like pull back and say, "Oh, excuse me, you go ahead," if I ran into someone. But I'm thinking, wait, this is a race, and I want to get to that common point that we're all headed to before she does. So I just kept swimming, and in that motion, my arm like shoved her underwater, and I swam over the top of her, and I just loved that feeling. It was just like I beat her to the buoy, and I mean it was just like the coolest thing ever. And but at the same time, I was totally freaked out because I thought, Sue, what is wrong with you? You shoved this woman underwater and you liked it? That was just like, oh my gosh. But when I got home, I talked to Brant, my coach, and I told him I thought we had a problem. I had shoved a woman underwater and I liked it. But he was all excited. He said, Sue, that's a really good thing. That's that competitive spirit that we want you to have. That's what competitors have. So I don't try to shove people underwater, but I know that in the fight of the triathlon swim, you bump into people, and sometimes that happens, and you're just all trying to get to that end point as fast as you can.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
that's a good, honest sort of, collision. But I mean, I've heard stories about people who are literally like holding on to the leg of someone else.
Yeah, yeah. I've had that happen
Ah,
actually, and
man.
I don't understand why people would do that. Well, yeah, I do. They I don't know why they do it. So, but yeah, but again, for a beginner, like my very first triathlon, I was the very last one to get into the water. I let everybody go ahead of me, and I just swam all by myself, my own little swim, so I didn't have to worry about anybody else. And yeah, it's real possible to do that.
That's, and you had a great mantra that you talk about, that you would recite to yourself when it was, at times when it's not easy to put yourself at the starting line, or to go to the boot camp, the fitness boot camp that you did,
Yeah.
that you talk about at one point in the book, or any, other unfamiliar situations that you find yourself in, which was something like, go away fear, go away pride.
Yes, that was the first time I said that. It was, you mentioned this boot camp that I went to, and I was terrified to go. I had never been to a gym. I had never exercised before. I was supposed to go with my friend, and my friend didn't show up, so I was all by myself. And I, stood at the door terrified. And I remember I put my hands out in front of me, and palms up, and I imagined my fear in one hand, and wanting to become fit and lose weight in the other hand. And I thought, which is more important? And then I said out loud, "Go away, fear,"
Mhm.
and walked in the door. And that just became my mantra. I started recognizing all the times that fear kept me from doing the things that
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yeah.
do. And I just learned to say out loud, very forcefully, "Go away, fear." And when I do that, it's like this wall appears in front of me, and fear's on the other side. It's there, but I'm not going to let it get to me.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm on this side of the wall, fear's over there. It's not going to change what I do. And I just do whatever I need to do. So, and then the other part of that was I started realizing how much pride got in my way.
Yeah.
I was afraid that people would laugh at me. I was afraid that people would criticize me. So I learned to do the same thing, to recognize when pride was getting in my way, and then just say, "Go away, pride."
Yeah.
My first swim in my first triathlon, I was still like majorly obese, and I hadn't worn a swimsuit in public for years because I was embarrassed about how I looked in a swimsuit with all my jiggly parts jiggling. And, in that race, I wore my bathrobe actually, until I got to the very start. And then I had to take off my bathrobe and walk in my bathing suit into the water. And I was horrified for people to see me. And I just remember saying over and over again, "Go away, pride, go away, pride, go away, pride," all the way into the water.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, but that mantra really became a lifesaver for me, as it allowed me to do things that I in the past wouldn't have done.
And I was thinking too that I think that's probably especially important for people who are maybe who had a long ago history of being an athlete or being competitive, or and they're are coming back to a sport, or they're embracing a new sport for the decades after their kind of their prime. And you have to start where you are, and
Yeah,
you can't be competing with the old self, but
that's such
with
a good point.
with the glory days.
And I think in my case, I kind of was lucky in that I didn't have an older, a younger me to compare
uh,
myself to.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
I think that must be incredibly challenging for people who were athletes in their youth and then got away from it, to come back and to remember what you used to be able to do.
Yeah.
And I think your point is just so good, just to say, this is where I am now, and to celebrate each little step that you move forward.
Yeah, exactly. That you're moving at all, that
Yeah, yeah,
that you have the that you have the health and possibility to be moving at all is just
yeah,
that's the thing to be thankful for, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to, when you're talking about the diet and the jiggly parts, but in the book you talked also about how easy it was to fall off the wagon, so to speak, about what kind of a carb addiction, right? Especially an addiction to, or maybe addiction is a strong word, but a real craving and an attraction to carbohydrates and sweets. And so much of that we know is driven by biochemistry, and we're
Mhm.
a lot of times we're just trying to replace something or produce something that we want. But do you still struggle with those cravings now, or have
Oh
you?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, still.
Yeah.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
We're doing this we're doing this interview shortly after Christmas, with Christmas cookies and Christmas candy.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, yeah, it's still a struggle. And I think it with anything that you really, really enjoy that's not healthy for you, is probably will always be a struggle. But it's so much easier. I've learned so much. And I think I don't think that there's a one size fits all diet. I think the diet that will work is the diet that you feel comfortable following and
Yeah.
will follow for a long time. My first diet was that I started out the book with this because I wanted to tell the story of failure to help people understand that you can fail,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that you stop. You just, you just find a new way, a new
Yeah.
path. And my first diet was one of counting points. And I actually was quite successful. I lost 66 pounds on that diet. But the way I did it was probably not how the originators of the diet planned. I ate all of my points for breakfast, and I still eat waffles, and then I just wouldn't eat the rest of the day. And that was that worked, but it wasn't sustainable.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I finally found that just eating a good old fashioned healthy diet with all food groups, I don't leave any food groups out, that works for me.
Yeah.
And then the other advice that I usually give people about weight loss is to just really pay attention to what works for you and what doesn't work for you. I think everybody's different, and for me, like I I know that if I fall off the wagon, I only have to be strong for 3 days, and then it gets easier. And I've just learned that over time.
Yeah.
I know that if I fall off the wagon for more than 2 days, it's harder to get back on.
Yeah.
And so if like over Christmas, I did eat some fun foods,
Hmm.
but I made sure that I didn't eat them for more than 2 days
Uh-huh.
because
Uh-huh.
then it would be hard to get
That's
back
good.
on
That's
track.
good to have that sort of knowledge of and being able to, this is going to be my
Yeah,
trigger point right here, and I need to stop before I hit that. Before I hit that.
exactly. And then there's mental tricks too that I'm
Mhm.
sure everybody has their own. One that I still use, I used it today. For lunch today, I took my apple, I cut it up into extremely thin slices and pretended that those slices were potato chips. I don't know. It just, you just got to figure out what works for you and,
Yeah.
and, and learn.
Yeah.
So,
So now, with this grotesque year that everyone is having,
yeah.
and the elimination of large races, and how are you doing with that? Is it hard to stay motivated, or?
Yeah, I think from what I read, I don't think that there was probably any serious athlete who didn't struggle with, how do we handle not racing, um, and how do you stay motivated? I decided it, there are a lot of athletes who just kept hoping that, the next race wouldn't be canceled and the next race wouldn't be canceled. What I did was in late May, I just predicted that all of my races would be canceled, and rightfully so, they were all canceled. But my coach and I decided to go a whole different direction. We Usually when I'm working on technique, it's in my post season when we let my fitness slide a bit. And so we decided to take advantage of this COVID season by keeping my fitness high when I wasn't racing, and then work on technique when I was fit.
Okay.
And so we're hoping that made a difference. And I'm focusing on my A races for 2021, and it's just been a longer preparation. That said, there have been times where it's like, I mean, it's hard to keep things up for a period of time without, the fun coming, the race part coming, which is
Mhm.
fun. So yeah, at times it's challenging. And um, I think, one of the hardest things for me was when we first decided not to race. I felt this huge sense of relief. And we really had a hard time explaining that because, we thought, oh my gosh, why would Sue be happy that she's not racing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really puzzling. And finally, we figured out what I was relieved about was that I didn't have to make the decision about whether or not to go or not go if they did have the race.
Okay.
If they had the world championship in August, I don't know if I would have gone or not. And that would have been a really hard decision.
Yeah, and it got
So
taken out of your hands that way.
yeah, that was a relief.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so there's all these crazy things that we all have, no matter what profession is, or what our profession is, or what our hobby is, this has impacted all of us. And I think it's, adjusting is always hard. So
So if 2021, God help us, please, is normal in any sense of the word,
yeah.
what's on your race calendar for 2021 then?
Yeah, so I'm still focusing on my sprint triathlon. I will do the national championship is in Milwaukee in August, and then Worlds this year is in Bermuda in October.
Nice.
So, and I qualified for the U.S. team again, so
Oh,
I
excellent.
get to go to Bermuda to race at Worlds, and
Like,
they have a new event, brand new, that I'm hoping to qualify for. We should. I'm supposed to know by January 1st, so I keep checking my email. But the new event is a triathlon relay, and it's co-ed. So it is also an Olympic sport. So there's 2 men and 2 women, and they're in your age group. So my age group for that event is 60 to 69. So it's a 10 year split,
okay.
and everybody does, each person does a very, very short triathlon. So it's just a 400-meter swim. It's I think it's a 5-mile bike and a 1-mile run, and then the next person goes.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to be invited to be on one of the relay teams for the United States, at the World Championship
Oh,
as well. But that would be a lot of fun to be part of a relay and get to do that with other people.
now are you still, I think you just said this a minute ago, but you are still working with Coach Brandt?
Yeah, I'm working with Coach Brandt. We've kind of put together a coaching team
Oh,
where Brandt is kind of the head coach, but I now have a strength coach, a specific strength coach, and a specific run coach that coordinates with Brandt on my training.
okay.
So
So now if somebody wants to get started, as a newbie, and as a triathlon newbie, and doesn't have access to a coach or what have you, do you have some sort of, beginner's advice and that you
absolutely.
share?
Yes. So a couple things. One is, if you have not done any of the events and you're just like me, you were just sitting on the couch for decades, I would really think about not pushing yourself too hard. My first walk was literally I think we decided it was half the length of a football field. I mean, that was all I could do. And then the next day I walked a little bit farther, and the next day I walked a little bit farther. So start really, really small. The other advice I always like to give is to find a fitness partner,
Yeah.
to kind of, celebrate the successes with you. For me, I didn't even realize I was doing that. It ended up, for me, it was my children. And every day I finished a walk, I would text them and say, woohoo, I walked to the 3rd driveway, and they would text back, congrats. And they became my cheerleaders, but also my accountability system, because I knew if I didn't text them, they would wonder if I had done my exercise for the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's kind of how I would start with whatever sport you think would be fun, or a
Yeah.
activity you think would be fun, pickleball, or whatever.
Right.
And then for people that are interested in triathlon, there's a website called mytimetotry.com, and try is spelled TRI, and I think two is spelled out TO, mytimetotry.com. And on there, they have free training programs, and it's interactive. You say what your current fitness level is, and then the computer spits out a training program for you. So that's
Okay.
totally free. There's also all kinds of resources on that website to help people learn about triathlon. It's just a really good website. And then the other thing is that there's a lot of coaches who will individualize your training for you. And I mean, I thought when I started as an obese person that, who would want to coach me? But I found that there are coaches that just love coaching.
Uh-huh.
And And there are also coaches that are very reasonably priced that wouldn't cost any more than going to the YMCA, every week.
Okay, that's encouraging.
So yeah, there's another website called usatriathlon.org that has a list of certified coaches, and you can search by your geographic area to find people that are local. But you don't have to be local. Like my coach Brant has athletes all over the world, and you just communicate electronically
Yeah.
with them, and that works fine. So yeah.
And
So
I'm remembering, if I'm remembering this correctly, your some proceeds from the book are going to a triathlon-oriented organization also, right?
yeah. So I wanted to, use the book to tell my story, hopefully that it would help people. And then I also wanted the proceeds to help people somehow. And I really looked around for a home for the proceeds,
Mhm.
and finally came up with USA Triathlon Foundation.
Okay.
Their mission is to help people transform their lives through sport. So their whole mission is about transformation, which is my story.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were a really good fit. And they have several different areas for their work. They support Olympic hopefuls. They also have a whole program for youth in triathlon. But what really spoke to me was the work that they're doing to help people with disabilities participate in triathlon. So people that are blind or missing a limb, or just all kinds of disabilities. And to see these folks, who are missing a leg participate in swim, or it's just the most inspiring thing in the world. And that's where I wanted to put the proceeds. So 100% of the book's proceeds are going to the foundation for that purpose.
That's really cool. And when I post this, I'm going to put a link to the book and a link to your website, of course, and then these other sites that you've just mentioned. I'll make sure
Oh,
that they're
great.
part of the post as well.
Good.
This has been a lot of a great conversation, a lot of fun.
It really is. And as I'm talking about like tips for beginning triathletes, now I'm hoping that you are one of them.
I really do want to be. That's and now, and maybe I'm even more inspired now that I was. And when I was working on my dissertation, I actually had a little part-time job at a store. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was called See Jane Run, and
Oh,
it was oriented to get women involved in running and triathlon, and they actually
wow.
sponsored a sprint length triathlon every year that was super user friendly. It was like, really to encourage first timers to get out and try this crazy thing. And they had workshops beforehand where you could talk and get some pointers
Oh,
on
nice.
how to survive the jostle at the beginning of the swim. And
Yeah, that reminds me, for women, there's another group. Their website is fundhertry
fun.
.org,
Okay,
and they provide small grants to cover the registration fees for women's first triathlon.
that's cool.
Yeah, and then they also will match up women who have done a lot of triathlons with people that are just beginning to mentor them, and that is free. So that would be for your listeners that are women. That would be another really good resource for them.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay. Yeah, I've got all these, and if I wrote them down wrong, you'll get an email from me saying, what was that one again?
Sounds great.
That's good. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I want you to stick around for a second, okay?
Okay, that sounds great.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much.
much. This has been fun.
This is wonderful. Thank you. One moment.